Math and science. All right, these subjects have probably been the most anxiety inducing subjects for any homeschool, really. At least it has been for me. So, hopefully, this review of the Alveary math and science curriculum will somewhat lessen that fear, lessen that anxiety. And I'm sorry, this is going to be another somewhat long video. Highly encourage you to do 1.5x, 2x playback speed. Pro tip for you right there. Hi everyone, this is Lillian from Living with Charlotte. And for those of you who do not know me, I am a Charlotte Mason mom and I homeschool my two boys. And I love all things Charlotte Mason. I am a fangirl of Charlotte Mason, probably the only one that says that. Yes, fangirl of Charlotte Mason. I don't know if anyone else says that. But if you are new to my channel, you can expect some deep dive curriculum reviews along with some of my own observations about Charlotte Mason's philosophy. So I'm so glad you are here. Today, we are doing a deep dive of math and science. And unless you've studied like math and science as your major or that's part of your career or, it's just something that you've naturally enjoyed, I feel like math and science has been one of the tougher subjects in our homeschool, and I'm sure with many other homeschools. I personally enjoy math, actually. I grew up loving math. It was my favorite subject. I took even college level classes in high school, even though I didn't have to. Like, I was that kind of person. I, taught SAT math to high schoolers once I got into college. So I personally love math, but somehow that didn't translate into being able to teach my kids math very well. Yeah, it's really sad how that turned out. But anyways, we'll get into math and science with how Alveary covers math and science. Quick shout out to my sponsor, Humble Heart Press, and they are the official printing partner for Alveary. Humble Heart Press, they have created beautiful, ready-to-use physical books of Alveary's curriculum, which I will show you later, and they've worked with Alveary to bind all the lesson plans and student books together per grade so that when you need it, it's ready to ship and it gets delivered straight to your door, and they make it really easy to have that laid out and printed out for you. So let's start with math, and you might be wondering, how does Alveary do math? How do they cover math? Are they writing their own curriculum? And if they are not, and they're choosing other curriculum to use, then what do the lesson plans cover? Those are the questions I want to answer today, is how Alveary structures their math lesson plans, how it progresses across the grades, and how it is aligned with Charlotte Mason's philosophy. Now, before we talk about how Alveary does their math lesson plans, we do need to talk about what Charlotte Mason's views were on math and the teaching of math. So if you had any kind of background similar to mine, we probably did not get taught math in a Charlotte Mason way. If you had a similar background to me, if math was something that was kind of forced down your throats, and if you weren't getting a good grade in it, maybe you needed additional practice and you were crammed into these math schools and math programs, having you just do these math drills over and over and these worksheets over and over. And I'm not going to name any names, but there is one particular one that rhymes with Dumon. But yeah, that one really was not very Charlotte Mason at all. Yeah, so we probably were not taught math in how the Charlotte Mason method would encourage the teaching of math. So Charlotte Mason had very specific ideas about how math should be taught, especially the introduction of math with younger kids. So she says in home education that arithmetic lessons should begin with the concrete. So think about, counting beans or, counting pieces of candy during Halloween. And before moving on to abstract numbers or abstract concepts, she believed that a child had to understand the why behind every process and not just follow a memorized formula. Yeah, I wish I was taught math using the Charlotte Mason method. Anyways, okay. So now Charlotte Mason was deeply concerned about how badly math was being taught during her time. In her 6-volume Philosophy of Education on page 233, she wrote, "Mathematics depend upon the teacher rather than upon the textbook, and few subjects are worse taught, chiefly because teachers have seldom time to give the inspiring ideas, what Coleridge calls the captain ideas, which should quicken imagination." So overall, as a heads up, Alveary does put a lot on the teacher to be leading the lesson plans. Like this isn't just a, hand a book or hand, a video off to your student and, let them figure it out for themselves. This is very teacher instruction heavy, and you'll start to see that throughout the lesson plans. So Alveary, like other all-in-one curricula, they have chosen math curriculum publishers to incorporate into their lesson plans. And the one that they chose is called RightStart Math. And now, why RightStart? So they're not really branded as a Charlotte Mason math curriculum, and they don't even mention Charlotte Mason on their website. So why did Alveary choose RightStart? In their guides, they give 3 reasons for why they've chosen RightStart. First off, RightStart does adhere to Mason's principles that the idea always comes before the algorithm or before any memorized formulas. So most math curricula, even good ones, will give you the procedure first and maybe explain the concept later, but RightStart flips that around, and children, they discover the mathematical concepts through manipulation, particularly the AL abacus, before they ever write down a single formula on paper. Second, Alveary states that RightStart reflects the best current research in how children actually learn math. So it builds a strong number sense, it integrates mental math throughout every single level, and it uses a base 10 approach from the very beginning that helps children understand our entire number system rather than just memorizing isolated facts. And then lastly, and this one probably matters a lot for those of us who might feel very intimidated by teaching math, RightStart offers teacher support. So webinars, customer service, a teacher's manual that walks you through how to teach each lesson. Now, Alveary does note, however, that for families, if you have a math program that is working for you, then just stick with that. You don't have to switch over to RightStart Math or whichever ones that they will recommend in their lesson plans. So just resist that urge of having to think like, oh, okay, if I'm going to use Alveary curriculum, then I have to use the math program that they're using. So, just relieve yourself of that stress. Now I'm going to walk you through what math concepts are covered throughout the grade levels. And instead of just rattling off this list, I'm just going to have it pop up here. Thank you to my friend and video editor for putting that here. So you can see throughout the grades what concepts are being covered through RightStart. And the goal here is to complete 1 level per grade. And Alveary recommends that all new students are that they take the placement test on RightStart's website. And regardless of grade, because RightStart's structure and how they introduce the topics are different from maybe the traditional math curriculum that we've seen. Now, for grades 5 to 6, along with the Right Start lessons, students in these grades will now take a once a week 15-minute lesson called The Story of Arithmetic. And this is spread across the 2 years. The text that is used is called Number Stories of Long Ago by David Smith. And this book will give students a glimpse of how arithmetic was actually developed throughout human history and how real people were solving real problems across the span of mankind. And they learn how fractions were used in ancient Egypt, how the Hindu Arabic numeral system started to replace the Roman numerals, and how the concept of zero changed everything. So, this living book serves to animate the subject of math and as a living story of human thought. Now, grade 7 is where the program shifts significantly. So, in grade 7, they will start doing two math subjects simultaneously. So, what I mean is, first, they'll do geometry from RightStart Math, and then in parallel, they will start to do pre algebra. And this is where they use the curriculum hands on equations curriculum. And students use physical balance scales and game pieces to discover algebraic concepts before writing abstract equations. Grade 7 is also when they introduce the story of geometry. So, similar to the story of arithmetic, they will go through a living book. This one is called String, Straight Edge, and Shadow, and it's about how geometry was discovered by the ancient Greeks. Now, in grade 8, they will continue doing that algebra and geometry learning in parallel side by side. They will begin Jacob's elementary algebra while continuing the Right Start geometry. And Jacob's is a classic beloved algebra curriculum that presents concepts through real world context and narrative examples. And it's one of those rare math textbooks that actually has a voice to it, and it's not just this dry textbook. Now, starting in grades 9 through 12, this is where they'll continue in alternating between algebra and geometry throughout their weeks. This was actually something done in Mason schools where they had both strands of algebra and geometry going at the same time. So Alveary has decided to preserve that practice in their lesson plans. The progression through grades 9 to 12, so I'll put that up as a list again here, and you'll see all the topics that are covered. For families who might want an alternative to some of the curriculum choices that they've made for the high school math curriculum, they also recommend a Denison track. So, Denison is a complete video based high school math program taught by a veteran homeschool dad. So if you want to check out any of the curriculum that Alveary has chosen, I will link those below in the description box, and you can check out their websites and look into it further for your own research. All right, so we are going to flip through the math curriculum for grade 8. Okay, just a shout out to my sponsor, Humble Heart Press. This is the printed curriculum you will get, and I'm flipping through grade 8, but for this book, there are all of these subjects bound together, all the lesson plans, and they have this nice tape binding, this see-through cover. And this paper is, you can't tell from video, but this is really nice paper that they're using. And they have this lay flat binding that makes it really easy to keep it open during your lessons. Math for grade 8, this is the flip through, and we'll start with about the course. It tells you what subjects are covered for grade 8. Placement and combining tips, scheduling. So you'll see here, like I mentioned before, you'll see how algebra and geometry, they are switching back and forth throughout the week doing that. Math games continue at this grade. And here's a sample of how you could lay out your weekly rhythm for the math lessons. Planning and prep. This is really good to go through as you're teaching through the material. Books and resources, and these are the different curriculum options that Alveary has chosen. Any supplies that you need, and quick links with, again, that QR code where if you're on your phone or tablet, you can quickly pull up any of those quick links by scanning that QR code. So here is their guidance on how to teach each of the math lessons. And for read, this is where you will be reading through the instructions that are there in the RightStart curriculum. And this may be done independently since we're in grade 8. Prepare, it's highly recommended that for this grade level that teachers do prepare in advance the material for themselves so that they know what the student is going through and how you can assist. And I really like each of these 3 sections here because this is really for you as a teacher to keep this in mind. So growth mindset, resist the temptation to fall back on just teaching a memorizable procedure when the student struggles. Leave and return. When your student hits a wall during a lesson, stop and move on to the next subject in your day or take a break, and then connect. Look for ways to bring math into everyday life and conversation, by the way. So I really like how they add that additional instruction for us as the teachers. So here is a sample of what you will see in the actual lesson plan. So you'll see that there is not much in terms of each lesson plan, in terms of the content that they put in the lesson plan, since they are using these other math curriculums. For algebra, they give the pacing of the lesson so that you would read through the introduction and practice which exercises to do. Same thing with geometry, and then it'll go back and forth: algebra, geometry, and they've written out which practice problems or which pages to go through. So they're taking care of all the pacing and sequencing through the curriculum that they're using. Here are the math exams. So you'll see term 1, term 2, term 3, and they'll give a sample question that they pull from the curriculum that they're using. So for algebra and for geometry. So that was the flip through of the math curriculum. And just to wrap up math, one thing to know, as I did mention earlier, that the teaching of math is highly dependent upon the teacher, which is you. So this is not a hand them a book, hand them this, and they go off and do their math lesson on their own. Alveary has deliberately made, especially for grades 1 through 6, made that lesson highly dependent on the teacher. So just a heads up about that. And then, as you might have noticed, in grades 7 to 8, it's highly encouraged that the educator is familiar with what's being covered to assist. And then in grades 9 to 12, that is where we can kind of step back and take on a more supervisor type of role versus being the actual teacher of the subject. To sum up, Alveary's lesson plans give you helpful instruction on how to conduct the math lessons, and they take care of the sequencing and the pacing of the curriculum that is being used and maps them across a 3-term school year. So 3 terms, 12 weeks per term, so that's 36 weeks. And they also build in catch-up days in the lesson plan, so it's kind of like a built-in grace period. And they tell you exactly how many minutes per day to work on it. They give you suggestions on what time of day to work on the lessons. So usually morning times are for the lessons, afternoon times are for the math games. And they give you tips on how to combine students of different grades where possible. And they also add that layer of the living books that teach about the story of arithmetic, the story of geometry. Now let's get into science. And here's what Charlotte Mason had to say about science. This is in Volume 6 on page 256. Of Natural Science 2, we have to learn that the way into the secrets of nature is not through the barbed wire entanglements of science as she is taught, but through field work or other immediate channel, illustrated and illuminated by books of literary value. Okay, so Charlotte Mason sometimes just has a way with words, right? Barbed wire entanglements. She's talking about the current science classroom, and barbed wire entanglements. Yeah, that could pretty much describe my own experience of science too. I'm not a big science person. But yeah, that I feel like that does illustrate it pretty well. I mean, she's talking about like the worksheets and learning all the taxonomy, the vocabulary of science, and fill in the blank and label this, and especially early on for younger kids. That's what she's talking about. So I could definitely relate to this barbed wire entanglement analogy. Now, Alveary's science curriculum, their design decision is this: that science is not a subject that you pour into the child, but rather it's a relationship you help them form as they are encountering things directly with their five senses. Everything else, the books, the labs, the journaling, is in service to this relationship. So, with that framing in mind, let's take a look at how they actually build the curriculum. Alveary's science curriculum has a three-part structure. I'm just going to call them buckets, actually. So the first bucket is all about nature lore, nature journaling, the nature walks, and scouting. So that's one bucket. Alveary describes nature lore as timeless knowledge that is passed through a community, much like a grandmother passes on how to make that special bread when the dough just feels right. So that's such a very lovely image. This is a layer of science that lives outdoors with the weekly nature walks, seasonal awareness, scouting, observation, and this runs through all the grades 1 through 12, continuously. So no child ever ages out of outdoor observation. So that's really great. Bucket two is what they call natural history, and this is more of a structured, methodical study of specific creatures and organisms that we would find in the natural world. And the goal is to build taxonomic knowledge and creature-specific studies systematically, but always through narrative, through story, always through the window of a real scientist who was genuinely curious about that thing. And later in the video, I will go through what is covered for each of the grade levels with natural history. And then the last bucket is general science. General science is the component that is all about the study of scientific ideas, processes, systems, and how we come to understand it. So this includes topics like life cycles or adaptation, and all the ways we come to know and understand these topics like chemistry or biology and robotics. So with their science curriculum, you'll see across the grades that it is a linear progression. They don't rotate through topics, but each topic has its place in each of the grade levels, and you'll see that next. So for Form 1, this is grades 1 through 3, and you might be familiar with that term forms. This is what Charlotte Mason used. It's a term that Charlotte Mason used to organize the developmental stages. So Form 1, grades 1 to 3, the stated goal is, as Alveary wrote, Form 1 learners are at the beginning of this relationship, developing familiarity and friendship with creation. So that means there's no memorizing facts, no memorizing names, no fill in the blanks. It's just simply to build that friendship. So obviously, this sounds like science of relations, right? And the book choices in this phase reflect exactly that priority, engaging narrative-driven picture books and nature readers. So I encourage you again to check out their public book list so you can see what books they have scheduled for this coming year in science. So Form 1, the scope and progression that you'll see in grades 1 to 3. Grade 1 is primarily about the child's most immediate world, just what they see right around them in their backyard, any habitats that are close to their home, to their neighborhood, creatures that they might encounter just in the backyard, or like insects in the house, like if you have ants raiding your house, so that's all included, or a neighborhood pond, and you'll see even more insects there. They might encounter, spiders or seeds, like anything along those lines. Grade 2 zooms out slightly to introduce the concept of biomes and the idea that a habitat is not just a place, but a whole interconnected system. And students will encounter creatures from biomes beyond their backyard. And then in grade 3, they are introduced to more abstract concepts like food chains, life cycles, migration, weather systems, adaptation. So you can see how the progression is they start with what is immediately accessible to them, what's familiar with them and right around them, and then they start to zoom out a little bit more and more and start to cover abstract concepts. And then nature notebook and scouting in Form 1, again, like you'll see in the flip through, there will be prompts, and it's all optional. The nature diary really should be the child's own record of what they noticed. Now, Form 2, this is for grades 4 through 6, and here's what Alveary writes. Form 2 learners extend the scope of the things they encounter and begin to notice that science is active in their world. Growing in their self-knowledge at this age, they may notice that they gravitate towards some of these things more than others. Their sense of community is expanding. Who are the scientists in their world, and what are they doing? So their book list starts to reflect the study and progress of science through the narratives of real people like the Wright brothers or the invention of the microscope by Leeuwenhoek. Leeuwenhoek. Hoek? I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. And it also includes more recent scientists of the 21st century. The relationship with science is deepening at this point, and it's deepening through the human story that is attached to the sciences. So every single one of these books follows a real person doing real scientific work. In Form 2 is when they also include lab work. And grade 4 is when Alveary introduces a required lab component. And the labs are sequential and progressive. So they describe them like math or grammar. Like each lab builds upon each other, and it builds a certain skill and habit. And this is a fundamental requirement that children need to encounter the things that they're reading about. So in Mason's words, science must come through fieldwork or other immediate channel, and so lab is the classroom version of that fieldwork. And the labs introduce skills systematically. So in grade 4, it introduces bar graphs and basic data recording alongside microscopy and sound experiments. Grade 5 expands on the graphing skills and introduces chemical observations. And then grade 6 brings in more sophisticated experimental design alongside plate tectonics and anatomy content. So one practical note, Alveary does provide a custom lab book per grade. In terms of the scope and progression of topics in Form 2, so if you think back to Form 1, every topic was from the biological and natural world, like creatures, habitats, seasons, plants. Now in Form 2, they expand beyond that biology. In grade 4, they'll encounter the microscopic world and physical science. Grade 5, they encounter chemistry, astronomy, meteorology, and robotics. And then grade 6, they'll encounter geology, anatomy, medicine, engineering, and oceanography. Okay, moving on to Form 3, grades 7 and 8. And here's what Alveary writes. Form 3 students extend their relationship with science in a new direction, time, and consider science as a process by which man seeks truth within creation. They begin to situate science in its historical, political, and cultural context with all the complexities of man's own story. So science is also a process. So it's not just a collection of settled facts and that's it, and there's no more science moving forward. Rather, science is a human story with all the complexity, including uncertainties and unknowns. One of the books that they include at this level is the Story of Science series by Joy Hakim, and that is the backbone of Form 3 General Science program. And this is a literary narrative series about the history of science and how key figures in science history have asked and discovered and sometimes didn't find the answers. Now, scope and progression in Form 3, one thing to note is that the frequency of science increases in middle school. So grade 6 general science now moves to twice a week, or it's already moved to twice a week. Grade 7 moves it to twice a week for 30-minute sessions. Grade 8 moves to 3 times a week for 30-minute sessions, plus weekly labs, natural history, and ongoing nature notebook and nature walks. Now, in high school, the shift moves towards textbooks. And why that shift? First, Charlotte Mason was not opposed to textbooks per se, but she, especially at the secondary level, but she did have issue with dead textbooks, like books that are written in this flat, lifeless, impersonal style with no author's voice and no genuine curiosity. But she did acknowledge that at the higher levels, certain disciplines require technical rigor. And at a certain level of chemistry, let's say a picture book about chemical bonds is just not going to cut it for for learning about chemistry at that level. Second, Alveary does not abandon Charlotte Mason's methods while using these textbooks. So students will still be doing field work via labs. They're going to still narrate, discuss. They're continuing in their nature journaling. There's going to be suggested reading of supplemental living books. Alveary's high school courses have an interesting structure, so I'll put that on the screen here, and you'll see that grades 9 and 10, it's chemistry for ninth grade, biology for 10th, and then starting with 11 and 12, a suggestion is to do physics in 11th grade, but they also include what's called electives. And some of those electives, it's really free. It's up to you and the student to choose between botany, geology, astronomy, microbiology, and advanced nature study. So kind of to recap that progression that we've just covered, in the early years, Alveary is building that love of and friendship with the natural world. And then in the middle years, they're building an understanding of science as a human endeavor with history and culture. And then in the high school years, they're building actual scientific literacy, the ability to read, understand, and engage with the scientific discipline at a very serious level. And practically speaking, if your student is intending towards college, to attend college, or taking the SAT, applying for a pre-med or engineering program, or simply they're wanting to be more scientifically literate, then this curriculum really sets a strong foundation for that. Now here is our science curriculum flip through, and again, this is for grade 8. And you'll see here they list out, which parts of the science components are covered for this grade. Here's about the course, what subjects or what topics they'll be covering. They even include this big picture so you kind of understand how the whole curriculum works, all the different pieces, how it works together. Placement and combining tips. Scheduling, so we'll see here, like I mentioned before, science tends to increase in the amount of time in their homeschool. So general science is 3 times a week, natural history 1 time, a lab, nature notebook, and nature walks and scouting. And then here is that sample weekly view of how to place that in your days. Planning and prep, this is for instructions regarding how to prepare for each type of lesson. And this feels like a lot, but they do have everything that you will need for the science lessons for the whole year. And they just have it all in this nice list here so that you can prep that. Any reminders that they give, and the books and resources that they'll use here, and along with the supplies list. So what's great is that Alveary, I believe they use Homeschool science tools, and they've partnered with them to have like a whole science kit that has all the supplies, and you'll see like a link to that when you purchase the curriculum, and that'll be in the supplies list. Other quick links. This is a really important one, outdoor work. So I'll do a flip through of that after I do a flip through of the lessons. So how to teach a science lesson, and starts with an introduction where before you open the book, you will activate what the child already knows. You might be looking at a picture, asking them what they remember from the previous lesson, and start to connect that together. And then there will be a read section. This is where The assigned reading will be there. And so in the earlier grades, you'll be going through a picture book or a nature reader chapter. And then in middle school and high school, this is where the students will be reading more independently. And if it's an activities-based lesson, this will be where they give all the instructions for how to conduct that activity. Of course, every lesson, the student is required to narrate and then discuss. So oftentimes they will give open-ended discussion questions, and these aren't necessarily the same as narration prompts. So these are more inspiring wonder. Like, did you ever think about creatures lifting up their voices? Or who do you hope to see the next time you are out at night? Which creatures would you see? Things like that. So there's no right or wrong answers. This is really to engage the students more into the lesson. And then finally, there's a connect section. So these will be any supplemental links, additional videos, and there will be like teacher tips in the sidebar of the lesson plans, and I'll point those out to you. There are also instructions on how to teach the lab portion. So there is also an introduce section, the lab procedure, how to conduct the analysis, making conclusions, and then of course, what to discuss further for the lab lesson. So here's a sample of what you will see as the lessons. You'll see that this is going to alternate between natural history, general science, general science, general science, and labs. So that would be a full week of science. And you can see how for this one, there is an activity. It'll give you all the instructions for that activity. There will be teacher's notes on outdoor work that aligns with what they are covering in their lessons. Other teacher tips. Again, there will be pullouts of important dates that you can also include in your book of centuries or history timeline. Just other helpful teacher tips to keep in mind. Note about pacing. Note about like other prep you might want to do if it's a lab work that's coming up. So really great, helpful teacher tips all throughout the lesson plans. And there are exams for every term, and these are also broken up by general science, natural history, and what they've done in labs. Now I want to do a flip through of that link that was called outdoor work. And this is what's so great about the science curriculum is they do emphasize how important it is to be outdoors and to be observing all the things that are around us, just out in the natural world. By the way, this is not a Humble Heart Press product. This is Lillian's printer that has weird lines going across it. So not as high quality as my beautiful sponsor, Humble Heart Press. So what's great about this curriculum is the outdoor work booklet has all the nature notebook prompts you would need throughout the grades. So there's general instructions on what nature lore is, how to go through a community walk, different inspiration for the types of focus you would have for nature walk and scouting. And this is by the seasons. And then you get into nature notebook prompts. So of course these are optional, but it is a great way to cover a wider breadth of observations just by having different types of prompts instead of just saying, well, what do you observe out there? So it really does help bring a focus to the nature notebooks. And this is broken up by terms, by weeks, and by grades. Now, before I wrap up the science curriculum section, I do want to note how Alveary approaches the intersection of faith and science in case that is an important factor in your decision to consider Alveary. So for the most part, from grades 1 to 11, Alveary is fairly quiet on explicitly making that connection between what they're studying in science and the Christian faith. So, since many of their book picks, book choices, are chosen for their excellence in conveying the subject matter, and not so much how it incorporates faith into the sciences. But there are a few notable places that Alveary explicitly has that intersection. So, in grades 1 to 3, they use something called the Christian Liberty Nature Readers, and these are explicitly Christian texts. Although I think just recently they published their own nature readers that are probably being swapped in for the Christian Liberty Nature Readers. They do keep one in the 3rd grade. So again, check out the public book list to see which one, if that will work for you. And then in the astronomy elective for grade 12, I think this is the most explicitly Christian course in the entire science curriculum. The primary textbook is The Crossroads of Science and Faith, Astronomy Through a Christian Worldview. So the course description says that students explore related topics in faith and science while exploring the night sky. And then in the biology course, they include the book The Fool and the Heretic. And this book is about the relationship between Ken Ham, who is a young earth creationist, and Todd Wood, who is a Christian evolutionary biologist. And it's a remarkable book that doesn't advocate for either position, but models intellectual humility and genuine Christian dialogue across this deep disagreement. Now, what about evolution specifically? This is a question I think that does come up often in Charlotte Mason circles or just in Christian homeschools in general. The Alveary does not take an explicit position one way or the other. Their book choices include content that assumes standard scientific frameworks, including evolution and deep time and the Big Bang, without explicitly endorsing or opposing them from a faith standpoint. So, The Fool and the Heretic in the biology course suggests that Alveary is comfortable exposing students to the conversation without resolving it for them. So, this is actually deeply consistent with Charlotte Mason's philosophy. She was not prescriptive about what children should conclude from their lessons and their encounter with the natural world. She believed that a mind that had truly formed a relationship with creation was a mind equipped to think well about difficult questions. She trusted the child, and Alveary on the whole appears to do the same. So again, check the public book list to see if those book choices will make sense for your family. So to wrap up Alveary's science curriculum, one thing I do appreciate about their curriculum is that they put the outdoor observation and putting the students in direct touch with the topics of science as fundamental, as a foundation for which to build on. And the books are a companion to what they are directly encountering through their fieldwork and through their labs. So that was Alveary's math and science curriculum. As you can see, it is a very robust curriculum for those two subjects, especially if those are subjects that you want to be the main teacher on. One thing about the science curriculum, if the rest of the Alveary doesn't seem like a good fit, but you do like how Alveary has structured their science curriculum, this is something that they do sell a la carte separately as a standalone product in their shop. So I have linked that in the description box below, so go ahead and check that out, and you can buy that separately if that's a good fit for you. Thank you for watching part 6 of my 10-part Alveary curriculum review series. If you haven't seen the rest of the series, click on this playlist here. It'll show up in the corner, and you can check out videos 1 through 5. And we are almost there at part 10. Thank you for hanging in there with this one, because this one is probably a long one too. If you like this video, go ahead and click like, click the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and please drop a comment about how this was helpful for you. You can also let me know if there is another grade you'd like me to flip through, since I am only focusing on grade 8. I can't do all of them in these videos, but I can record separate videos if there is a certain grade you'd like to take a look at. Let me know if there are other curricula you'd like me to review in these videos. I have some queued up already, but definitely I would love to take your suggestions and make sure that I incorporate them. Please share these videos if you think it was helpful for you. And if you haven't already, please sign up for my emails. There is a freebie that I am sending out to my email list when you subscribe. It is a Charlotte Mason Big Five curriculum decision matrix. If you are considering any of the Big Five, like Alveary, Ambleside Online, CMEC, Simply Charlotte Mason, A Gentle Feast, any of those, I created a decision matrix for you to help aid in your decision to see which one would be a good fit for you. You can click on the link that is in the description box below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!